My mom laughed when I told her I had lost my job. She didn't stop stirring the soup. She just said, "I told you that company would never keep someone like you." Her voice was calm, almost bored, like she was talking about the weather. My hands started shaking. The room felt smaller, like the walls were slowly closing in. I stared at the cracked tiles under my feet, trying not to cry, trying not to breathe too loud. That was the moment I understood something I had avoided my whole life. In this house, I wasn't her son. I was a problem she wished would disappear. My name is Daniel Harper. I was 33 and living in my mom's old guest room in the small town of Maple Creek. The kind of place where the grocery store clerk knows what you ate last week. I had always been quiet, the type who said sorry even when nothing was his fault. I worked as an office clerk, or at least I used to. Before that morning when my badge stopped opening the door. Every morning I woke before the sun. Not because I had somewhere to go, but because my body was used to panic. The mattress sagged in the middle and my back always hurt. I would lie there listening to the pipes knock inside the walls, feeling my heart thump like I had just run even though I hadn't moved. My mouth tasted bitter. I kept a glass of water on the floor. But it was always warm and flat by the time I reached for it. That morning I sat on the edge of the bed holding my phone, rereading the email that said my position had been eliminated. My fingers felt numb. The room smelled like dust and the lemon cleaner my mom used everywhere. There were boxes in the corner from when I moved back in 6 months earlier. She said it was temporary, but she never asked when I'd plan to leave. Downstairs, I could hear my mom talking to my younger sister, Lily. Their voices floated up the stairwell like they were another world. My mom laughed in that soft way she never used with me. I felt something press behind my eyes, the start of a headache that never really went away. I didn't know yet that this morning was only the beginning of being erased all over again. I finally forced myself out of the room and walked downstairs. The floor was cold through my socks. In the kitchen, Lily was sitting at the table scrolling on her phone, her coffee already made. My mom stood at the counter, packing Lily's lunch into a bright blue bag like she was still a child. "You're going to be late," my mom said gently to her. "I know, Mom," Lily replied with a smile. I cleared my throat. "Morning." Neither of them answered at first. My mom kept folding napkins, pressing the creases hard with her thumbs. When she finally looked at me, her eyes slid past my face like I was furniture. "There's cereal," she said. "If you're hungry." The box was empty. I shook it anyway, hearing only dust inside. My stomach tightened and made a quiet sound I hope no one noticed. Lily glanced at me, then back at her phone. "Daniel, don't stand in the way," my mom said. "Some of us have real jobs." The words stung more than I expected. My ears felt hot. I poured myself a glass of tap water and drank too fast. It burned my throat. When Lily stood up, my mom brushed crumbs off her jacket and kissed her cheek. "Call me when you get there." Lily nodded and left without looking at me once. I stood alone in the kitchen staring at the dirty cereal bowl from yesterday that was still in the sink. My chest felt hollow. Like someone had scooped something out and forgotten to put it back. I didn't know why I still hoped for kindness from her, but I did. And every time I hoped, it hurt more when nothing came. The way my mom treated me that morning wasn't new. It was only clearer because I had nowhere else to hide. When I was a kid, I thought all families worked like ours. I thought sons were supposed to stay quiet so daughters could shine. I thought being ignored was a normal part of love. When I was 12, I brought home a report card with straight A's. I remember the paper shaking in my hand as I showed it to her at the kitchen table. She glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds and said, "That's what you're supposed to do." Then she called Lily over to admire the drawing she had made at school. My chest felt tight, but I smiled anyway because I didn't want to seem ungrateful. Years later, when I got into a state college on a small scholarship, I waited all evening to tell her. She was on the phone with my aunt, laughing about Lily's cheerleading photos. When I finally spoke up, she covered the receiver and said, "Not now, Daniel." I stood there for a long time holding the acceptance letter until my fingers cramped. The first time I realized she was actively pushing me out was after my dad died. We were sitting in the living room surrounded by old boxes of his things. I picked up his watch and said I'd like to keep it. My mom didn't even look at me. She said, "Lily should have that. You'll just lose it." The room smelled like cardboard and old cologne. I nodded, but my throat burned. I started to notice how often she spoke for me when relatives were around. Daniel doesn't really know what he wants, she would say. He's always been a little slow. People would nod politely, and I would feel my face go numb, like it wasn't even attached to me anymore. That was the first painful realization. She wasn't just forgetting me. She was rewriting me. The second painful realization came a few years later. When I moved back home after my divorce. I had tried not to. I slept on a friend's couch. Then in my car for a week, until my back felt like it was splitting open. Finally I called her. She sighed loudly into the phone and said, "I suppose you can use the guest room. Don't make it a habit." That night I lay in the dark staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the motor click. My skin felt tight, like I didn't belong inside it. The next morning, I heard her on the phone telling my aunt, "He's here for a while. You know how he is. Can't keep his life together." I stood in the hallway with my hand on the wall, feeling the paint rough against my palm, trying to stay quiet so she wouldn't hear me breathe. A month later, I found a stack of envelopes on the counter addressed to Lily. They were from a company my dad had once worked with. Something about shares and annual statements. I didn't open them. I just asked my mom what they were. "They're not for you," she said. "They're family matters." I wanted to remind her that I was family too, but the words stuck in my throat. She had said it so calmly. Like it was a simple fact that didn't need discussion. After that, she stopped telling me when relatives were coming over. I would come downstairs to find the house full of people who acted surprised to see me there. My mom would smile tightly and say, "Daniel's still here. We're hoping he finds his way soon." Every time she said it, I felt smaller, like my body was shrinking inward. By the time I lost my job, I already knew I had been erased in every way that mattered. What I didn't know was how far she had gone behind my back. 2 days after I lost my job, my mom called a family meeting. She didn't use my name. She stood in the doorway of my room with her arms crossed, her mouth pressed into a thin line like she had already decided the outcome. "Be downstairs in 5 minutes, she said. My stomach dropped. I could feel sweat forming under my arms even though the room was cold. When I sat at the table, my palms were damp and left marks on the wood. Lily was already there with her laptop open, typing like something important was happening. My mom cleared her throat. "Since you're not working anymore, you need to start contributing in other ways." I nodded slowly. "I'm applying everywhere. I just need a little time." She waved her hand. "Time is something you've already wasted." The words made my ears ring. I leaned back in the chair, trying to breathe without making noise. She slid a piece of paper across the table. "You're going to sign this. It gives Lily temporary authority over the family consulting firm, while I recover from my surgery." I stared at the paper. My vision blurred around the edges. "What firm?" My mom looked annoyed. "Your father left a small stake to both of you. Lily's been helping me manage things. You never showed interest." "That's not true," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't even know about it." Lily finally looked up. "Daniel, it's just paperwork. You don't need to understand all of it." My chest felt tight, like someone was pressing a fist into it. "Why would I sign something I don't understand?" My mom stood up so fast her scraped the floor. "Because you live under my roof. Because you owe this family something. Or you can pack your things and be gone by the end of the week." The room smelled like burnt coffee. My hands were trembling so hard I had to grip the edge of the table. I wanted to scream that I'd already given them everything. Instead, I folded the paper without signing it and slid it back. Her eyes hardened. And I knew something in this house had just shifted. That night I couldn't sleep. The house creaked like it was alive, every sound a reminder that I didn't belong. My chest hurt in short, sharp bursts. I kept replaying the way she had said Lily was handling things, like I had never existed. The next afternoon, I came home from the library and found my suitcase sitting by the front door. It wasn't even zipped. One sock hung out like a tongue. My mom stood in the hallway with her arms folded. "I gave you time," she said. "You chose not to cooperate." I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry. Like I had been breathing dust. "I'm protecting my daughter," she replied. "You're not stable right now." Lily watched from the stairs. Her face pale, she didn't say a word. I knelt and started stuffing my clothes into the suitcase with shaking hands. My skin felt cold, even though sweat was trickling down my back. As I passed the kitchen, I noticed a large envelope on the counter with my dad's old company logo in the corner. My name wasn't on it. Lily's was. I picked it up before I could stop myself. "Put that down," my mom snapped. "What is this?" I asked. She walked over and yanked it from my hands. "It's none of your business." But I had already seen the words through thin paper. Transfer of majority shares. Effective immediately. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might faint. "You're giving everything to her?" My mom didn't answer. She just turned away and opened the front door. The air outside was cold and smelled like wet leaves. I stood there with my suitcase, my legs numb, while she held the door open like I was a stranger. I wanted to beg. The word "mom" was on my lips. Instead, I walked out without looking back, not knowing that I had just stepped into a lie big enough to destroy all of them. I spent the first night in my car behind a closed grocery store. The seat wouldn't lean back all the way, so my neck stayed bent at a painful angle. Every few minutes a truck passed on the highway and its headlights cut through the windows, waking me again. My hands were stiff from the cold, and I kept rubbing them together, feeling the rough skin on my knuckles catch. I kept hearing her voice in my head. "You're not stable right now." The words felt heavy, like stones in my chest. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and tried to slow my breathing. It smelled like old coffee and the lemon air freshener I had hung months ago, when I still believed I would get my life together. In the morning I went into a public bathroom and splashed water on my face. My eyes were red, my cheeks hollow. I barely recognized myself. I wanted to scream at the mirror, but the sound stayed trapped inside me. I sat in the library for hours, pretending to read job listings while my thoughts kept sliding back to that envelope on the counter. Transfer of majority shares. The words didn't make sense. My dad had always told me he wanted things divided fairly. He had said it more than once, his hand resting heavy on my shoulder. My stomach twisted every time I remembered it. That evening, I checked in the cheapest motel I could find. The carpet was damp and smelled like bleach. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, my legs twitching like they wanted to run. Somewhere I had nowhere to go. I thought about every time I had stayed quiet. Every time I had let her speak for me. My heart beat faster with each memory, not with fear anymore, but with something sharper. I wasn't ready to forgive. I wasn't even ready to understand. But I knew one thing with painful clarity. I wasn't gonna beg anymore. Sleep didn't really come after that. It hovered just out of reach, leaving me in that heavy space between waking and dreaming where old scenes replay on their own. I saw my dad in his chair by the window, the afternoon light catching the silver in his hair. He had told me, quietly, "You don't owe anyone your silence." At the time I didn't understand what he meant. Now the words pressed against my chest until it hurt to breathe. My body started reacting before my mind did. My jaw ached from clenching it. My stomach refused food. Even when I forced down a sandwich, it sat there like a rock. I paced the tiny motel room until the thin carpet fibers stuck to my bare feet. Every step felt like I was walking off years of being ignored. On the third night, I pulled out my laptop and searched my dad's name with the company he used to mention. I expected nothing instead. I found an old press release from 10 years earlier, listing him as a founding partner in a small consulting firm that had grown far larger than I realized. My hands began to shake so hard I had to set the computer on the bed. There was a line at the bottom about share distribution held in a family trust. A family trust. The phrase made my skin prickle. I thought about the envelopes, the secret phone calls, the way my mom had said family matters if it didn't include me. For the first time since I walked out of that house, my fear was mixed with something close to resolve. I didn't know the details. I didn't know what I was allowed to see. But I knew I wasn't wrong to feel erased. And if there was a truth buried in all of this, I was done pretending I didn't deserve to find it. The next morning, I started digging. I went through old emails my dad had left on a shared account, legal documents tucked into dusty drawers at my old apartment, and even a few online records I barely understood. Every detail felt like stepping into a world I had been denied. My fingers trembled as I read the trust agreements, and the shareholder lists, and the notes about voting rights. The truth was there, hidden in plain sight, but it was layered in legal language and deadlines I wasn't sure I could meet. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in corporate trusts. The phone call made my chest tighten, but it was the first time someone had treated me like I had a right to ask questions. "You'll need documentation proving your father's intent and your legal share," she said. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I had half a box of papers in the motel room, and an aching fear that I might miss something crucial. I tried calling my mom casually, pretending I was just curious about family matters. She answered with her usual calm dismissal. "Daniel, don't bother with things you don't understand." I felt my teeth clench. Then came my first failure. I tried to access the company accounts online to confirm my ownership percentage. Every password I remembered had been changed. My stomach sank. For a moment, I thought about giving up. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had no place here. But that night, lying on the thin motel bed, I remembered the mornings when she ignored me. When she gave everything to Lily, when she laughed at my failures. I pressed my hands against the mattress, feeling it give beneath me. I wasn't going to be erased again. I pulled out a notebook and started cataloging everything: emails, phone records, old letters, even casual mentions of the company in her social media posts. I mapped out every step she had taken and every weak spot in her plan. I didn't know if it would work. I only knew that doing nothing had never worked before. And I wasn't about to start now. By the time the motel lights dimmed, I had a plan forming in my mind. But I also knew that even the best plans have setbacks waiting in the wings, and mine was about to hit hard. The first real setback came when I tried to confront Lily quietly. I thought maybe she didn't know the full story, that she might help me without angering Mom. I sent her a carefully worded email asking to meet. 2 hours later, she replied, "Daniel, leave it alone. You're making this worse for everyone." My chest tightened. Her words weren't just rejection, they were a warning. I had hoped for an ally, even a small one. Instead, I realized my family had been rehearsing my erasure for years, and Lily was already on their side. I spent the next day pacing the motel room, the cheap carpet scratching my feet. I reread every email from Dad, every old document, every note I'd scribbled down. There was a pattern. Mom had left tiny traces of his intentions in places she thought I'd never notice. I could prove ownership, yes, but it would take patience and precision. One misstep and everything would collapse. Then came another setback. I attempted to access one of the company's internal portals using a temporary password from an old email. It didn't work. It locked me out entirely and sent a notification to Mom's phone. My stomach dropped and for a moment, panic set in. I imagined her smiling, knowing she had thwarted me before I even started. I realized this wasn't just about legal documents or numbers. It was about endurance. If I wanted to reclaim what was mine, I had to outlast her control, her casual cruelty, and the years of being erased. That night, lying on the thin motel bed, I felt my body exhausted but my mind sharper than ever. I traced every document, memorized every signature, and noted every discrepancy in the trust records. I could feel the weight of the coming confrontation settling into my chest like a cold stone, but it no longer terrified me. I whispered to myself, over and over, I am not her burden. I am not erased. I am not powerless. The setback had nearly broken me, but instead it became fuel. And by the time I finally closed my notebook, I knew the day was coming when the truth would be undeniable. The day I decided to confront everything. I walked into the company office carrying a folder that felt heavier than my suitcase ever had. Inside were copies of every legal document proving my ownership, emails from my dad, trust statements, and notarized declarations I had gathered. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of years spent being ignored. I requested a meeting with the board, careful to sound casual, like I was just a concerned family member. The room was sterile, the smell of coffee and paper filling the air. When I opened my folder and laid everything on the table, the executive's eyes widened. They flipped through the documents, murmuring confirmations, nodding, and occasionally glancing at me with cautious respect. This proves you have majority shares," one of them said finally. "Your mother and sister transferred control without your consent. Legally, this is yours." A shock ran through me so sharp it felt like ice in my veins. I had imagined confrontation thousands of times, but hearing it aloud was different. The truth wasn't just mine anymore, it was recognized, undeniable, official. I let myself take a breath, slow and steady, letting the tension drain from my shoulders. My chest still ached, but there was a lightness too, like I had stepped out of a long, suffocating shadow. The moment I left the office, I called my mom. My voice was calm. "We need to talk." She didn't hang up. But I could hear the quiet tension on the other end. For the first time in my life, she didn't dismiss me, didn't laugh, didn't brush me aside. Something in her shifted. And I knew she was about to feel the weight of everything she had tried to erase. And in that pause, I realized the story wasn't over. It was only beginning. When I returned home later that day, I didn't knock. I didn't need to. My mom and Lily were sitting in the living room, both with stiff, almost frozen expressions. The air smelled faintly of burnt toast, but it was heavy with something sharper: anticipation, fear, maybe even guilt. I placed the folder on the coffee table. Everything, I said simply. The company, the shares, the trust documents, everything Dad intended for me. It's all here. Lily's eyes widened, she opened her mouth. Then closed it. My mom's fingers twitched on the edge of the couch as she looked down at the floor. No words, just silence. I spent months collecting this. I continued. My voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. I didn't want to fight, I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth honored. Lily's lips trembled. Daniel, I didn't know, she stammered. But her eyes weren't innocent, they were caught between fear and shame. My mom finally lifted her gaze. Her face was pale. And for the first time, I saw hesitation. The slight tremor of a woman who had been certain. She controlled everything, suddenly confronted with reality. Daniel, she whispered. Her voice lacked its usual command. I didn't respond to it. I let Lily sit with it. I let all the years of silence, dismissal, and humiliation settle in the room between us like dust. For the first time, they weren't laughing at me. They weren't pretending I didn't exist. They were listening. And they were realizing how wrong they had been. I could feel the air in the room shift, thick and slow, carrying the weight of truths that had been denied for decades. And I knew that once this settled, nothing could erase it again. But my mom still hadn't said the words I had been waiting for. Sorry. She didn't shout. She didn't yell. She didn't try to argue or defend herself. She simply sank into the couch, her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. Like she had been holding it for years without realizing. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Lily's face was pale, and her hands twisted in her lap. I could feel the tension in the room as thick as fog. Then my mom finally looked up. Her eyes were wide and guarded, and for the first time, I saw her without armor. I saw guilt, and shame, and the weight of every insult, every dismissal, every erased moment pressing down on her. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I sat across from her, feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that the truth was finally recognized. Sorrow that it had taken so long. That it had required so much patience, so much endurance, to reach this moment. I didn't know, she whispered finally, almost inaudible, as if the words themselves were foreign to her mouth. I nodded slowly. I know. Her shoulders sagged. The rigid control she always carried like armor was gone. She was quiet. Broken, in a way that words could never capture. Not defeated by me, but by the truth she had spent a lifetime trying to rewrite. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just let her sit with it, knowing that the silence between us now held more weight than any argument could. And for the first time, I realized that revenge didn't have to be loud. Sometimes the quiet collapse of truth was enough. I left the room with my chest lighter, carrying the knowledge that the past had been acknowledged, and nothing she could do would erase it again. A few weeks later, I was back in my own apartment. The one I had finally rented after months on the move. The walls were bare, the floors creaked, and sunlight filtered in through dusty blinds. It wasn't much. But it was mine. Every morning, I made coffee in silence, the steam rising slowly in the small kitchen, carrying a faint aroma that felt like freedom. I didn't check on my mom every day. I didn't call Lily constantly. I let them exist in the house they had built without me, knowing that the truth was settled and could no longer be denied. Sometimes I imagined them sitting quietly, thinking about how it could have been different, but I didn't dwell. I focused on small things: grocery lists, the mail, emails from work. The rhythm of ordinary life felt new, almost precious. One evening, I drove past the company's office. The building looked the same, but it wasn't the same to me. I had walked its halls as a ghost before, ignored, dismissed, erased. Now, it felt different. I had a voice. I had authority. But the satisfaction wasn't in dominance or confrontation, it was in quiet acknowledgement. The knowledge that my existence and efforts could not be ignored again. Sometimes I thought about the nights I spent pacing motel rooms, rereading emails, tracing old documents, feeling every memory as a physical ache. Those nights had forged something inside me: patience, resolve, and a deep understanding that some battles are won not with anger, but with persistence. And slowly, without anyone noticing, the weight of humiliation, rejection, and erasure started to lift. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my quiet space in the world. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without the tension in my chest, like I could move without the fear of being unseen. And in that silence, I realized something profound. Survival, acknowledgement, and peace mattered more than triumph. The past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer controlled me. Looking back, I realize now that the story wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It wasn't about making Mom or Lily feel what I had felt for years. The story was about me. About learning that my life, my choices, and my dignity were mine to protect, no matter how many times others tried to erase me. I thought revenge would be loud, dramatic, a kind of vindication. But the truth taught me something different. It's quiet, it's persistent, it doesn't need applause. When I held the documents in my hands, when the board recognized my ownership, when my mom finally faced the weight of her choices, the satisfaction wasn't in their reaction. It was in knowing I had reclaimed my place without losing myself in anger. Distance became my ally. Not the distance of hate, but the distance of clarity. I no longer needed constant acknowledgement from the people who had dismissed me for so long. I didn't need to see guilt in their eyes or force apologies I might never hear. I only needed the truth to be settled, and that was enough. I also learned that dignity is more powerful than control. Owning the company, proving my legal right. It mattered. But it mattered most because it reminded me that I could stand tall, even when no one else believed in me. That I could survive betrayal, neglect, and humiliation without losing the part of me that mattered most. Sometimes I still think of the mornings in that small guest room. Of my mom's indifferent voice. Of Lily's distracted smiles. It hurts, yes. But it no longer defines me. Those memories are no longer chains, they are markers of how far I've come. In the end, I understood that survival isn't about overpowering someone else. It's about honoring yourself, claiming your place, and refusing to let the weight of someone else's cruelty define your story. And when I finally sip my coffee in the quiet of my own apartment, feeling the sun on my face, I know one unshakable truth: I am here, I am seen, I am enough. No revenge, no shouting, no chaos, just the steady, undeniable weight of a life reclaimed.